My blood went cold as I saw the latch on my root cellar door, a latch I had secured with a heavy iron padlock just that morning, now hanging open. A gasp escaped my throat, a sound swallowed by the dead silence of the crisp autumn air. What in the world was going on? The faint scraping sound from the depths of the cellar answered my question, my stomach lurching with a mix of fury and disbelief. I knew in my gut who it was. The rustling of burlap sacks, the clinking of jars, the familiar sounds of my winter stores being tampered with. It was her. Could only be her. I crept closer, my heart thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I'm a quiet person, you know? I like my garden, my canning, my solitude. I had just finished stocking the cellar for the winter, the culmination of months of work, preserving every tomato, every apple, every beet. It was my sanctuary, my labor of love. And now someone had desecrated it. A whisper, sharp and condescending, drifted up from the darkness. Oh, look, a jar of pickles. They're probably so bland. I'm telling you, Sharon, she doesn't know what she's doing. This is a mess. That voice, that insufferable, grating voice. It was Heather, the self-proclaimed HOA president, or the HOA Karen, as I called her. I knew she'd be down here, but she had a sister named Sharon? I hadn't known that. I took a shaky breath, my hand finding the heavy chain that I used to secure the door. This was it. This was the line in the sand. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not again. Not ever again. I pulled the chain taut, my mind a blur of righteous anger. As I listened, the sounds of their trespass echoed up the wooden steps. A sigh of exasperation, a soft thud as a jar was carelessly set down. We just need a couple of those sweet potato jars to prove our point. I heard Heather hiss, her voice echoing in the small space. The bylaws clearly state wait. What's that? A sudden silence. I could hear Sharon's nervous whisper, Heather, I don't think we should be here. Too late, Sharon. Way too late. With a final, decisive click, I slammed the iron latch shut and threaded the heavy padlock back into place. The clang of metal on metal was deafening in the sudden stillness. A sharp, terrified shriek erupted from below. Hey, what was that? Open this door, you lunatic. My voice was steady, calm, a stark contrast to the panicked wails now bouncing off the wooden walls. You are on my property. You are in my root cellar, and you are trespassing. The deputies are on their way. A moment of stunned silence, then a chorus of desperate pounding from inside. You can't do this, Heather screamed, her voice cracking with fury and disbelief. This is a violation of my rights. We just came to inspect. This is an HOA matter. I leaned against the door, my own shaky hands trembling. Inspect what? Was she delusional? There was no inspection clause in the HOA bylaws. Not for private property and certainly not for a root cellar. A chill wind rustled through the dying leaves on the ground, a sad whisper of what was to come for her. My neighbor, old Mr. Gable, had been watching the whole time, his face a mix of shock and morbid fascination. He had a look in his eye that said, it's about time someone taught her a lesson. The siren wail started as a distant, hopeful cry, growing steadily louder. Inside the cellar, Heather's fury was escalating. I am calling my lawyer. I have a friend at the county office. You're going to jail. The pathetic bravado was almost comical, if it wasn't so infuriating. I just stood there, my own heart rate finally slowing. It was an odd feeling, this calm after the storm. The feeling of being completely in the right, of finally having the upper hand. The deputy's SUV pulled up, lights flashing. Officer Miller, a no-nonsense type, stepped out. Ma'am, we got a call about a break-in. He looked at me, then at the locked cellar door, his gaze lingering on the splintered wood where they had pried it open. I took a deep breath. Officer, I began, my voice clear and steady. They didn't call you for a break-in. They called you because they broke into my root cellar, and I locked them in until you arrived. They're trespassing. His eyebrows shot up. He hadn't expected that. From inside, Heather's panicked yelling punctuated my words. He's lying. He assaulted us. We were just doing an inspection. Miller walked over to the door, his eyes scanning the flimsy lock that had been broken. "Ma'am, can you open the door?" he asked, a hint of suspicion in his voice. I took a step back. "I don't think that's a good idea, officer. I don't know what they've done down there or what they'll do when they get out. They've already damaged my property. I'd suggest you take a look at the lock first." He nodded and pulled out a small evidence bag. He carefully placed the damaged padlock inside it, then took out his radio. "Dispatch, I'm going to need a search warrant and a team. We've got a confirmed break-in. Suspects are contained." Heather's hysterical screaming turned into a desperate, sobbing mess. "No, you can't. I'm the HOA president. This is a misunderstanding." I watched as Officer Miller's face hardened. He was no stranger to the entitled rants of people like her. It was then that I saw Sharon's face through a small, cobweb-covered ventilation gap in the door. Her eyes were wide with terror, but she shook her head almost imperceptibly, a silent plea. A silent, desperate signal that she wanted no part of this. It was a small detail, a silent twist in the middle of all the chaos. It gave me a moment's pause. This wasn't about her. This was about Heather, about her unchecked power and arrogance. After what felt like an eternity, a search warrant was obtained and a small team arrived. They opened the cellar door, and the sight was exactly as I had imagined. Heather, red-faced and disheveled, stood amidst my carefully organized jars, a jar of my grandmother's heirloom blueberry jam clutched in her hand. Sharon stood a few feet away, her head bowed in shame. "Officer, you see?" Heather blubbered, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He's a hoarder. He's a public nuisance. We were just documenting it." But the lie fell flat. There was no trash, no mess, just my perfectly preserved food. And there, next to her foot, was a small digital camera, its power light blinking. "Ma'am," Officer Miller said calmly, "I'm going to need to see that camera." Heather's face went white. She had been recording her own crime. Her plan was to document what she believed was my hoarding and use it against me at the next HOA meeting. She had planned to take pictures of the mess and use them as evidence. What she didn't realize was that the timestamps on the photos would prove that she was on my property, inside my locked cellar, a place she had no right to be. And the last picture she had taken? A close-up of a jar of pickles, with her own reflection clearly visible in the glass. It was over. She was done. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No more blustering, no more threats. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed terror. The deputies took her into custody, a silent, grim procession as she was led away in handcuffs. Sharon, her sister, stayed behind. She just stood there, her body trembling, and her eyes, wet with tears, met mine. She didn't say a word, just nodded once, a gesture that spoke volumes. It was an apology, a thank you, and a silent admission of her sister's wrongdoings, all rolled into one. I didn't say anything either. The silence was more powerful than any words could be. The next few days were a blur. The news spread like wildfire. The once feared HOA president was now the subject of public ridicule. The HOA, with Heather's reign of terror over, was finally being restructured. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak up before came out of the woodwork to share their own stories of her tyranny. I was no longer the quiet, reclusive neighbor. I was the one who had stood up to the bully, the one who had won. And I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't about winning, not really. It was about justice. It was about knowing that you can't just let people walk all over you, no matter how much they think they're entitled to. What do you think? Was it right to lock her in, even for a short time, to ensure she faced the consequences of her actions? Or was that a step too far?